Today I want to talk about mainly, we're going to get into a lot of different things, container gardening on small containers. And that would be the best. But here's the thing, we have too many challenges, and most people do. Who knows what's going on with your soil? Then the plants that are there all year are going to be depleted of nutrients as well as water. Be it a bucket like this, I just pick it up and tip it. Is the food from the grocery store now? How come it's got a shelf life of many, many months, and yet I picked this yesterday? Think about it. Today, the main topic will be large containers versus small containers for growing in. And you know what? Sometimes the large containers are just too big and too costly. Hi, it's Robbie from Southern California. You caught me while I'm working in my garden. You know what? I actually want to talk about something today. I want to talk about container gardening, and I don't care if it's a small pot or a giant raised bed. Raised bed is still container gardening. But there's something I want you to think about, and I'm not going to tell you how to garden. You're going to have to garden the way you want. You know what? I'll sit for a moment and we'll talk about this. I love my stools. Why do I use a stool with no back? Because I can swing around, and I don't want a chair that swings. You all know, if you've been watching me, that I container garden. I have nothing for sale. Let's get this right off in the beginning. I am literally growing in the fashion in which is the easiest way for me to garden, including Gary, who swore he would never garden in a tote. Remember that? Quite a few years ago. I think he's got more totes than me. But let me tell you why, and let me tell you what would be the best. Ideally, the best way to garden would be in the ground as nature intended it to be. And that would be the best. But here's the thing, we have too many challenges, and most people do. And it's not always the challenges that you think they are. You might think, well, it's rodents, or it's the weather, or it's trees. It could be anything. Your soil may not be good. Your soil may be too much sand or too clay or too salty. Who knows what's going on with your soil, number one. And number two, in your average backyard, your soil gets depleted from nutrients that your plants need. Keep that in mind. So once you've planted, it might look really good for a year or two, and then things start to fizzle out. And you will have to get into plant food and all that. And you go, well, wait a minute. Isn't that the best way to grow? It is. But think of Mother Nature. She's constantly making soil every single minute. So you would have to replenish your soil in order for it to work. But it's challenges. We have challenges. So let's cut to container gardening. Why do I container garden? I container garden because we have trees, number one, who send their roots into everything. Yes, even fig trees, pine trees, pepper trees that are all over the property. They send their roots into my plants. Now, being that we're in Southern California, we can pretty much grow all year. Then the plants that are there all year are going to be depleted of nutrients as well as water, especially on warm conditions. And that's when things will start to change. Now, when you live in an area where you only have 4 months, generally a lot of you are emptying your containers and putting all brand new soil in. But some of you can be building the soil all year and be ready for those 4 months instead of spending a lot of money. The main thing is we're going to talk about why the big ones can be backbreaking to take care of, where the small ones are not. And I have no control of all the weed abatement going on around here, including, I have no idea what Gary's doing back there. So dealing with containers, I have full control on water and plant food. Now I make my own plant food. They're easier to handle and easier to plant in. And it works out so much better, and it's cheaper too. So that's why container gardening works. Why? I have control of my garden. I'm not letting nature control my garden. In other words, the plants around me. Now, why do I grow in totes? Why do I grow in pots and buckets? I mean, I grow in 1-gallon buckets. I grow in 5-gallon buckets. I grow in these great big things that are what, almost 20 gallons. I even grow in these things, dishpans from the dollar store. The point is, I have control over that. And this helps me out. And we have to replenish it. Why do we have to replenish it? Because our plants, especially vegetable plants, are heavy feeders. Your zucchini, your squash, your tomatoes, your peppers, so many of those cucumbers pull all the nutrients out. And that's a good thing because we can put it back with our own plants. As you start to grow, you're going to have your own plants. You don't have to buy plant food, but if you want to, most certainly buy plant food. So this is what I want to talk about today. Let's start with a small pot. So let's say this pot has been growing a tomato in it, because you grow a tomato in here, really good, all right? The first year, you're gonna have tomatoes like mad. Then you're gonna go dig it all out and put a new tomato in next year, right? Well, you might get a few tomatoes, but it's sucking all the nutrients out of there. And if you don't add any more, by the end of that second year, you're not going to be getting much of anything. The plant will fizzle out, and that will be the end of it. So what do you do when that happens? You have to replenish it, right? We've got to take at least half the soil out, put in whatever we want, even if it's a leaf from our own plants, put it all back in there, because this turns in the compost, and that's great. But you know why I like the smaller ones, including the totes? On a tote, I can shovel out half of it and put it into something, be it another tote, a bucket, mix in some leaves and different things and put it all back. Be it a bucket like this, I just pick it up and tip it. Same reason I'm growing potatoes and other things that way. I can have control and I can do it with one hand and tip it, put everything I want on the bottom and start all over. Okay. How do you do it if your raised bed is bigger than an 18 or 30 gallon tote? What happens to those raised beds? Now, when you've got them in the ground, let's say you live in an area where you've got a really short growing season. Think about it. There's a lot of gardeners out there that do garden that way. They've got 4 months to get those tomatoes and cucumbers and everything growing before the snow starts to come in. The point is, if they're growing in a raised bed, what do most of them do? They take everything out. They put in all new soil, whether they buy it or make it. Most of them buy it. I do not. I buy a little bit just for the top for my seedlings, but that's it. The rest of it is all homemade by nature. And then they rebuild their beds and they go back to it. That's fine, but I'm too old and tired to start shoveling out four by 8 foot beds, shoveling out gallons. And you know what? When you go buy these big ones, a lot of you have told me it's cost you between $200 and $300 to fill it with soil. You know, that's the easy part. You go buy it, you dump your bags in there, and you grow in it. First year, you're going to get tons of stuff in those great big beds. I don't want to say the brands because there's a lot of those big metal ones, the steel ones. The point is, the first year is great. The second year, you know, it's so big, it's probably still going to grow. But the third year, you're done. And you're not going to know what hit it. Now, if you've got tree roots, they're going to come from underneath and they're going to suck everything out before you're even starting to grow, because tree roots can send out roots all year, even in the winter. How in the world, and I'm asking you, do you empty those great big beds? How do you do it? I don't know. I know how easy it is to do this. This is nothing. This is fantastic. And you don't throw any of that away. But how do you empty the big ones? And do you have the ability to do it? Now, if you're lifting weights, you know, and doing all kinds of stuff and you're strong, yeah, it's going to give you a great big workout. And that's perfect. But I don't need it, nor do I want it. So before you start building all these different things or purchasing all these different raised beds, step back and think about when you're not gardening and when you're getting ready to garden the following year, because I want you to garden for life. For your life and for life. I want you to set up a garden and be so excited that when winter comes and you're kicking back and watching Hallmark movies or Great American Family Channel or whatever you're watching on TV, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait till spring is here. I want you to be that way. I don't want you to be sitting back at Christmas time all through the holidays and going, oh, gardening season's coming. I got to empty that thing. I got to figure out where I'm going to put everything and get more soil. I want you to be excited because you're doing it right. And then you go, wait a minute. Nature Nature doesn't empty. She doesn't empty. But she builds constantly by dropping leaves and everything. Anything on the ground that can break down gets broken in the soil. Your plants, your vegetable plants, are only growing in what? 7 to 12 inches. That is basically it. So every year, all the time throughout the year, nature's building more soil. And that's what you need to think about. So doing it by nature in a container, we have to build this up. You could start low and you can add to it, but it's not that big to start with. Totes, I let a lot of mine drop down and then I build from the top, but eventually they get to the top, so you want to take a lot out. I take about half out, especially where it's draining, and then I put back more. But there's nothing wrong with taking out a bunch of containers out of your totes, put it aside, throw an all new matter in there, and then dumping it back, because it will all work through. All the microbes and everything in there, and your earthworms will work it all through. So that's what I want you to think about. Let's go look at something, and then you tell me how you're going to do it. So here's my raised bed that a lot of you have been watching, because I said I'm going to get it set up, and I'm about ready to get there. It has taken me over a month to fill this up. But if you look, it's all filled up by leaves from around my garden, all kinds of stuff. I don't put a lot of cardboard in there because I don't know what's in cardboard. Think about it. You're getting stuff shipped to you, and how are they storing that cardboard that it's not getting roaches or anything in it? I know that some of it's treated. I don't know if it's all treated. And you know what I have found? When I load cardboard in here, toilet paper rolls are different, they're very thin, but the cardboard a lot of times, especially if you put it on the bottom, when you start to dig through, I have found it full of mold, and a lot of things won't eat it. So it's not always, so I put a little bit in here, but not that much. I will use ads and different things that come, you know, newspaper and stuff. I don't use the shiny stuff. But getting back to this thing does weigh a ton. It holds about 100 plus gallons of soil in here. So, or compost. This is going to be a job for me to empty when it comes to the time to be empty. Then there will be a time that I will have to empty that. I don't have hired help, so I have no one that's going to do it for me. A lot of gardeners do have hired help. And well, it's just me and Gary. And though I'm not concerned about it right now, it is something to think about. Is this good for your yard or your garden, whether it's this one or some of those other brands you can buy? Now, some of the other brands you can buy do come in a flat box and you put it together. But go back and look at the history on people that have been using it for quite a few years, because some of them start to bulge and fall apart. They're held together with a wire inside that goes across. So you don't want to just start stabbing a shovel in there, because you could break it, because there are wires that hold them together so they don't bulge. This is one solid unit. It's not going to bulge. So there's a lot of things you want to think about. The other thing is sometimes when you're emptying them, you can't get them apart. So in other words, you can't take it apart, empty everything out, and put it together, because they all wear down. All your raised beds wear out eventually, be it wood or metal or plastic. They will have to be replaced at some time. This one cost me under $100. Some of the other ones you can buy that come in the boxes can go into hundreds of dollars depending on the height and the size you get. So on the other ones, I decided to go against that because some of the stuff I read up on it, I didn't want to even get into it because I don't know how in the world I would take it apart to empty it, and they were too big to do anything with as far as emptying. With this, I can shovel out all this when it turns into beautiful soil. I can use it in flower pots and different things around my garden, including vegetable gardens in smaller containers, doesn't matter, and get it to the depth I want and then start to refill it. But at that point, once I get it way down, I can tip this thing over, push everything out, and put it back. This is solid on the bottom with holes, and solid on the top. The other ones that you're buying don't have bottoms. So if you're dealing with gophers, if you're dealing with tree roots, who knows what else, it does go into your ground, and so whatever can go out can come in. So keep that in mind. Those would not work for me due to all the trees we have around here. I decided to go with this one after doing a lot of research because it's tippable. They do have them bigger and it would have been too big personally for me. This is going to work really good for me, but I will tell you, the ones that I'm the happiest with are your totes. Do they break down? Sure. Sometimes they only last a couple years. Sometimes they last, I've got some that are 7 years old. It depends on how you treat them. If you keep soil in there and you keep it damp, then the plastic stays nice and you don't pull on it or abuse it. They can go for quite a few years. Even this thing will eventually rust out on the bottom. All the other ones you buy that you're spending a fortune for will rust out. To fill this, had I gone with a halfway decent soil, not even the best and not the worst, halfway decent soil would have probably cost me over $200, easily more. I can't afford it. I just can't do it. Nor do I want to do it. I want soil that's alive. I want soil that earthworms and microbes are going to want to go to because that makes my plants grow bigger. If I buy soil that is full of chemicals in it or full of plant food, as soon as that plant food is gone, the plants suck it up because no earthworms are going to come there when you buy bagged soil because it's already broke down. Well, at that point, your plants are done. So you have to start buying, plant food for it or do something. I make 2 systems. You know how that is. You can put a bucket, load up compost from the kitchen, like kitchen scraps and stuff, and put another bucket on top to keep critters out, and then just water the bucket on the top. You go watch the video. I'm going to set that up in here as well. It will add in extra nutrients. But this one is solid. Look, I can move it even though it's full. And that's the point, is I can tip it if I really wanted to go that far as emptying it. So think about your containers, think about what you want to use, think about if you can deal with it when the time comes for you to empty it, and just think about your size. Smaller works good because, like I said, the plants only need 7 to 10 inches of space, most of them, as far as root space, and what they need is matter to grow in. And this is already breaking down because it's already settled. Now I may put 1 bag maybe of a mediocre soil in here that I buy from the store to get started. And while I'm watering my plants and the soil is filtering through that I bought into the leaves, all this is going to break down. I mean, it's amazing. Go watch the other video how I put everything in a tote. And within a month, everything was gone. It was rich black soil. So I want you to think about this as you're going in the gardening season. Some of you are already planting. Some of you are getting ready. And some of you are still thinking about if you want a garden. Garden in which will work for you. You can use a flower pot and grow all kinds. You can have a ton of flower pots. You can get them at the dollar stores. Set them around your yard. Get tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce. I love growing lettuce. That's been my biggest thing. I can make a big salad every night and I don't have to think about going to the store. I can grab tomatoes, other greens, mix it in. And what I love about smaller containers is you can move them as the weather changes. So you have too much sun, put your lettuce in the shade. And that's what's good. I'm not moving this around, but I'm trying this out. This will be the first time I grow in something this big, but I think it's going to work out. I just want you to think about it. And think about some of the stuff you're spending a lot of money on. Do you want to spend a lot of money on it? Is it going to work for you? And think of the maintenance, because it's the maintenance nobody's talking about. I've seen some gardeners go out there and put them together and say, look at this, and then go back and watch their videos. You don't see it set up in their yard anymore. You don't see anything growing in it, or you'll see other people where things are growing in it. But kind of look at that and check some of the other videos out, because it looks like it's pots that they're putting in there, fluffing things around. And then you've got tomatoes 1 week growing in there, and the following week you got cucumbers growing in there. Don't let anybody trick you into anything. You're smarter than that. I know that. You buy and set up what's going to work for you. And if you do that, I guarantee you, you will be gardening for the rest of your life. So I hope it gave you something to think about. Ask questions. I love questions. I may not get to all of them because literally thousands come in, and keep asking because I do read through them. It stays up there, and then I come back and do a video on it. Or I sometimes go back even a year later and I answer them. But I answer as many as I can every day. So with that, have a wonderful day. And don't forget to eat what you grow. Bye-bye. And do grow something and eat it. It's so important to get real, live food in our body. Even if you're buying from the grocery store, mix in something that you grew and you know is totally alive. Because the food from the grocery store now, How come it's got a shelf life of many, many months, and yet I picked this yesterday? Think about it. And the plus side, this is so easy to take care of. Anybody can do it, any age. Okay, maybe not 0, but close to it. But you know what? 100, you can do this.